Story 1. I had a flashback or nightmare of an exact situation that happened to me in Iraq. I fired my gun at the ground as a warning shot inside my condo, ran outside 5 minutes later seeking help, and was shot by the cops. I'm not trying to preach or sway anyone, I'm just going to tell the truth. I got shot 7 times. 7. Should have been more, but bad aim helped. I clinically died at least 3 times. What happened during that time was pretty intense. I'll try to sum it up in a few paragraphs, but words don't really do it. I saw myself from an outside perspective, flying through a dark tunnel. I was a ball of light and energy, flying super fast. This is all I could recollect for days. Me flying through this dark tunnel, but nothing more. I was having flashes of what was soon to become full memory, but I pushed them aside as just the morphine messing with my head. On the 3rd day, I was in the hospital and a surgeon came into my room. He asked me if I remembered waking up after they shocked me and pumped me full of adrenaline. I had no recollection at all. He said that I came back, went back down, and then came back again screaming, "No, no, let me go." I still didn't remember what happened. He asked me again in a different tone, telling me he'd seen it before and was curious. He said they had to restrain me even though I was shot twice in the chest and had a jaw and shoulder in pieces. I was fighting hard for something. As it started to come back, I denied remembering anything again because I didn't want to sound crazy. I'm not crazy. After the tunnel, I was all of a sudden in the most beautiful blue water I'd ever seen. I describe it like a coloring book blue, a shade of blue that only a child might know, such as the last time I played with crayons. On each side was grass that was just as beautifully colored as the water. There were people lined up on both sides. Even though I didn't pay attention to them much, I'll never forget the smiles and the love I felt radiating from every direction, especially right in front of me. At the end of the water was the most beautiful light I'd ever seen. It was like a sun that I could stare directly at with no negative effects on my eyes. With all of my heart, I felt like I had to get to it because I needed it. I don't know why, but it was my entire life wrapped up into one mission. I needed to get to this beautiful light. My memory gets blurry here, but I remember being right there in front of the light and feeling an unearthly ecstasy. There's no word in the English language to fully explain it. Apparently, they shocked me. I came back to consciousness and then lost consciousness. That part I kind of remember. It was then that God spoke to me. The words hit me right in the chest as he said something along the lines of, "It's not your time," or "I'm not ready." It wasn't communicated in words, but rather energy being passed from him to me. The second time the surgeon asked me, I quickly remembered everything that happened. I remember not wanting to leave. I remember the love, the light, and the ecstasy of what home really feels like. The fight I put up was indignation expressed in the words, "How dare they take me from there?" Consider next time that you leave work, a friend's home, or a restaurant and say you're going home. Just remember that while home is where the heart is, you're not home yet. The other side is nothing to be afraid of. When we cry at a funeral, that's us being selfish that we didn't do this or that with the person. The person that passed did just that, passed the test of life, and is now full of more love than can be imagined. I would recommend being happy for them and pray for the day you'll see them again. This story was shared by Stephen H. and happened years ago. Story 2. Another driver crossed lanes and hit my car in a head-on collision. My co-worker, who was riding with me, was completely unharmed. I, on the other hand, was very confused of what happened, why I was coughing up blood and couldn't breathe. I remember that rain was hitting me in the face and remember how peaceful it was. I wasn't in any real pain at the time. One of the last things I remember before I lost consciousness again was my co-worker trying to keep my head upright and yelling that the ambulance was coming. At that moment, I felt my soul leaving my body. I was looking down at the wreckage and I trying to comprehend what was going on because nothing was making sense. I'm not sure exactly how much time had passed before I saw a tunnel form around me. It had a lot of positive energy that I was drawn towards. I entered the tunnel and felt like I was home. I was still seeing myself as if I were still in my body, and then everything seemed to dissolve. I realized that my body was just a vessel for my soul that held my consciousness and allowed me to perceive my earthly reality. As I kept walking through the tunnel, the warmth and light got stronger. It was as if I was being hugged by this energy. It had so much love for me. I was completely at peace with myself and the life that I had lived. I was okay with passing on. I was no longer scared. On the outside of this tunnel, it was very hard to see because the light was very bright, but I was able to tell those familiar beings were there to welcome me. I suspected that they were friends and family that have passed before. As I kept getting closer to the end of this tunnel, I noticed that the source of this energy began to take form. I believe this was my guardian angel. We did not exchange words, but I knew so much information instantly. My guardian angel wanted me to return back to my body. I remember that I did not want to return. The tunnel became like a doorway, and if I stepped back out, it was very cold. I could start to feel the amount of pain that I was going to feel coming back to my body. When I was looking back out, I could see the medics pulling me from the car. There was an older lady leaning against the ambulance and waving me on to come back down. I realized that nobody else could see her. I turned back to the source of the energy and noticed that my guardian angel was gone. Everything else started to kind of vanish. All of a sudden, I regained consciousness in the ambulance. I felt excruciating pain. When I arrived at the hospital, I was unaware of what was really happening. I vaguely remember my family was there saying their goodbyes to me. I could not understand why. Then I went unconscious again and had a slight feeling from the same energy from the other side of the tunnel. I realized that there was a reason why I must go through this experience. I woke up several hours later in the hospital. I had survived a stage 4 aortic tear and sustained several other severe injuries that I'm currently still dealing with. This experience completely changed my life and gave me a completely new outlook on life. There were many hard things to get over while I was in the hospital, which is a whole other story. I'm currently trying to get this story out to be heard and hopefully help people. Hopefully reading my story can ease someone's mind if they are nervous or scared of death. I have learned it is actually a peaceful and most beautiful thing to happen. I now know we are all connected. This story was shared by Isaiah J. and happened in 2019. Story 3. Easter 1971, I was involved in a high-speed car crash. I was in the passenger seat, trapped upright by metal debris. People around me were shouting that I was dead, and I could not even lift an eyelid to indicate I was okay. I remember being above my body but still in the car. I was fully conscious of all around me. I felt no fear, and this kept me in good stead for future experiences. The ambulance got me to hospital, and I remember being on a table. I was above my body as they cut my clothes off. In October 1973, I was bedridden with a heavy flu. After a week, I was in bed and heavily hallucinating. I was floating in and out of bliss that consisted of being in a nice place where the colors are brighter and senses more alert. I was alternating between this place and my earthly reality. The doctor was called and I was admitted to the hospital with both lungs collapsed. Only the top half of the right one was working. In the hospital, they took samples and sent them for analysis. This took 8 days, whereby I was given no drugs but continued to float in and out of this other world. With a week at home and 8 days in hospital, I gained control and could float in and out of this alternative world at will. I used to get annoyed at the nurses and doctors entering the room, as my new reality would be shattered and end my bliss state. This would consist of the following. 1. The tunnel, which I liked. The walls coming in, giving you security, and the only way was forward. A good way to treat normal life. Don't deal with things you cannot control, just follow the light. 2. The room alters and becomes a scene. This all shatters like glass with no noise when someone enters the room and reality returns. One that stands out is a Wild West bar scene, and I knew it was Australia. I was sat at a table and a saloon girl was behind me with her hand on my chair. I couldn't see her, but I knew she was there. We were close, several others were there, and there was an atmosphere. The correct drugs were administered, and there were further complications where surgery and a spell in intensive care followed. I met an American in the hospital and we became close friends. He became like a surrogate father to me. Years later, whilst living in Holland, I was struck down outside my apartment, clutching my heart and unable to breathe. I could not make it up the stairs, and my girlfriend at that time loaded me in the car. She went upstairs and cleared the flat out and drove us to England to the safety of the English Health Service. There were times we thought we were not going to make it, but we cleared Dover and headed for the Leeds Chest and Heart Hospital. Things now eased as we got there, and I passed every test they had. They thought we were wasting their time. I then went for a 5-mile run and was fine. Months later, I returned to the Isle of Man and went round to visit my friend Larry. His landlord told me he had died in hospital of a heart attack, crying out my name the same morning I collapsed in Holland with my supposed heart attack. This story was shared by Dave C. and happened in 1973.